Alright, so in today's tutorials, we're looking at how to create different data types in R, and we will be beginning with vectors. So we will start with how to create our own vectors in R. So vectors. So to begin with, how do we create our own vectors? You have to note that a vector is a sequence of data elements of the same basic type, right? And its features may include characters, logical, numeric, integers, complex, and so on. So to create your own vector in R, we make use of the function, the container function known as C, right? And this should be small c, right? So we are going to assign the first vector to an object known as bin1. So we are going to use a C function. That's a container function to create a vector, and R always assumes a vector to be a column vector, right? So let's say we have, this is basically going to be a numeric vector, right? So let's say we have 8, 0, -3, and let's say 12, right? So this is a numeric vector. We'll run this. So it's being stored in our history environment, right, as a numeric. Another way of creating a numeric vector. So let me copy this. Right. So another way of creating a numeric vector, I'm going to change this to bin2, is to make use of the sequence function, right? So sequence from 0 to, let's say, from 0 to let's say 12, right? And want the difference should be by 2. So let's see how this works. Let's run this. So this is another numeric, right? So let's see v1, run this, right? Let's see v2, right? So this is our numeric, and this is basically giving us, right, some set of even integers, right? So if you want to look at a class or the type of object that you have, you can use the class or type of function in R. So this is what I mean. Class bin1 will help you to know the attribute of the object that you have created. So let's run this. That's numeric, right? Or you can use type of, right, v2. Let's run this. It's also the double, right? Double and numeric are basically the same, right? Or you can use class if you doubt it. Class of v2, run. That's numeric. So when you say double or numeric, they are basically the same, right? So this is just an example of the numeric vectors. Let's look at how do we create an integer vector. So let's say this is an integer vector. So v3, we have, let's say, 1 to 5, right? Let's run this. So v3 is being stored as an integer. You can also use the class or the type of function to check class v3. So we have an integer, right? This, we can also create our own integers by making use of a modified version of this. So let's say we have c, we're going to have -7, we add l to it. Once we add l to all the numbers, it's going to change it into, or R is going to assume it as an integer. So we have 8l, let's say 20l -15l. So let's there should be a comma here. Let's run this. Right, let's look at the object. So if you look at the vector 4 is being classified as what, an integer. So this is another way of creating an integer vector, right? So let's look at just the last example under creating our own vectors. So let's look at characters. How do we create characters? Character vector. So in this, let's say Vim5, we have this, it should be in string. So let's say we have plant, we have land, and let's say we have air. So we have created a vector. So let's run this. Right, so these are all in strings, so R assumes this to be a character, right? So you can also use a class or type of function to check. Class Vim5, which is a character, right? So this is basically how we can create our own vectors in R, right? Now we can also look at let's say creating an empty vector, right? We can also create an empty vector. So let's see how do we creating an empty vector. So let's say we have empty v. I'm using empty v for empty vector. So to create an empty vector, I just place C and nothing should be in the parentheses, right? So this is basically an empty vector, right? So let's try and run this. So we have created an empty vector, all right? Okay, so what can we do with this? Maybe we can actually fill in using the for loop, right? So let's say for an index I in, let's say 1 to 8, right? We want to fill in this empty vector. We want to fill in this empty vector, right? For with the element in this, right? So that's basically what it's going to do. So let's run this. Sorry, let's run Control Enter. So now let's call the empty vector. Let's run this now. Right, so it has actually filled each of these spaces with the element 1 to 8, right? So you can also create an empty vector and work with it, and you will need this when you are actually creating your own function in R. So it's very important to take note of that. Let's look at the next step. What can we do with vectors? So we can actually look at looking at the ordering or the sorting of vectors. Basically, this is what I mean. Maybe you want to look at the ascending order or the descending order of an object. You can make use of the sort and ordering function. So sorting stroke ordering in let's say with vectors, right? So assuming we have v1, or let's create our own vector by using the sample function. There's another way of creating your own vector. So let's say we want to sample from 1 to 10, right? And the size should be, let's say size of 5, but here we want it to be with replacement, so we say replace is true, right? This is another way of creating your own vector by using the sample function, right? So with this let's run this and let's see v1. So this is what we have, right? Assuming we want to arrange this in ascending order, we can make use of the sort function, sort v1. So this basically is going to be in ascending order, right? So ascending order, right? So you see, it's now arranging it in ascending order. Another way of doing this is to make use of the order function. Basically, when you use order, it just gives you the position of the element in this vector, in the vector that you have just created. So if you use this order, it's giving the position of the object vector 1 that you have created. So in order to use this for ascending order, you just have to use the name of the vector, then you bring the square bracket, right? So we are good to go. When you run this, it will be similar to the sort function, right? So it's also arranged it in ascending order. What if we want to arrange the vector in descending order? We make use of the same sort function, but this time we introduce the decreasing, we make use of the option decreasing function, and this time we want this to be true. By default is false, right? So we want to make it true so that it will arrange the element in descending order. So we have descending order. So let's run this. So it's basically arranged the element in descending order, right? Okay, so I think we are good to go. Now another thing that we can do with vectors is to make use of the size. Maybe you want to know the size of the object, right? Or want to know the element in a vector, the size, or let's say number of elements in a vector. How do we get that? So we can get this result by making use of the function length. So assuming we have a vector, let's create another vector. So let's say we have v7. So we are going to use the random numbers rnorm, right? This is another way of creating a vector using the random generator functions like the rnorm. So we need, let's say, 10 of them, right? We need 10 random numbers. The mean should be 0 and the standard deviation should be 1. So let's basically run this. So let's say v7. Okay, let's run it again. I didn't run it. Okay, so now you can check v7 or spelling. This should be small v. Okay, so v7. I'll run this. Okay, so we have that. So this is another way of generating random numbers, right? Or generating random numbers in a vector. So we have this, and maybe we want to know the size of this, right, vector. We can use the length, which is v7. So when we run this, it's basically giving us 10, right? Or yep. So I think we are good to go. So anytime you want to know the number of elements in a vector, you can use the length function to get that result, right? Okay, so the next thing is to look at how do we even give some names to vectors. So assuming we have vector 8, we have, let's say, 90.78. We have 73.46 or 67. Then we have 22.16. All right. So as we have this vector, I want to give some name. So naming vertex. So we have this, right? So I want to add some names to the numbers that we have in this container. So what can we do? We can just say v8, right? Let's say C A should be equal to, let me use A should be equal to 90.78. B should be equal to 73.67, right? Then let's say C should be equal to 20.16. So let's board and run this. So now let's look at V8. Let's run. So right, we have assigned some names to the element in the container, right? Let's look at another way of doing this. We can also do this by using the set names function. So let's say we have v9 to be equal to let's use the repeat function to create another vector. Repeat, let's say 3 times, right? So we have created another vector by using the repeat function. So let's say v9. Yep. So we want to actually use the set functions to set names functions to basically give names to this element that we have in the vector. So let's see, we call v9, then we create a container and basically give name. The first one should be, let's say, A, the second one should be B, and the third name should be C. It should be in string, right? So I think we should be good to go. Let's run this. So actually it does the same work as what we have just done here. So I think we're also good to go. So what next? Let's look at how to basically index index some vectors. How do we index indexing in vectors? Index and vectors. So assuming we have another vector, let's say v10 is equal to let's say we have 3 minus 9, we have, let's say, 6, we have 13, and we have, let's say, 20, right? So we have this vector. So let's call v10. So we know this is our vector, and let's say we are interested in vector, we are interested in element 3 alone, only just 3 from this vector. We use the square bracket for the indexing. So this is basically the position for the first element is 1, the position for the second element is 2, 3, 4, 5 in that order. So if you're interested in only this, we just make use of the 1, index 1. So the square bracket is to help us with the indexing. So this basically select only the first element, right? So let's run this. right? So we have 3. Suppose we are interested in 20. We know the index, and this is the first position, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So we need 5, right? So let's use this. Copy. So we have 5. So it gives us for 20. Right. So let's say we need only the second, which is -9, to, let's say, 13. So we need 2, 3, 4, right? So let's this select only the fifth element. So let's paste this, select only the second, right, third, and fourth elements. So how do we do that? We are going to have 2, 2, 4. So 2, 3, 4. We need that. So let's run this. So that's what we have here. Now, assuming we want to add some element to this vector, right? Or yes, let's first look at the replacement. Assuming we want to replace this is negative, we want to replace it with positive object. So assuming there's a mistake, this is supposed to be what? 9, positive 9. How do we replace? So replace, we want to replace -9 with positive 9. How do we do that? So the vector, which is vein 10, the position of this, or the index of this, is 2. So we want to replace this with an object of 9, right? So let's do that. And now let's look at vein 10. Let's call vein 10. If we call this, let's look at it. So it has now been replaced with what? 9, right? Now let's look at how do we add some element to this vector that you have created. Maybe we want to add 3 more elements. So I want to add 3 additional elements to vein 10, right? So vein 10, we need to know the indexing. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need 6, 7, 8. So from 7 to 8, we want to add some numbers. Let's say 4, 5, and 7. We want to add this to this, right? So let's run this. Right. So number of items to replace, not this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, it's supposed to be from 6 to, because this is just 5. So it's supposed to be the 6 position, 7, and 8, right? So this should be good to go. Let's run now. Okay. So vein 10, let's look at it now. So we have replaced, or we have actually added some 3 more elements to the initial vector that we have. So I think we are good to go. So please, I think this brings us to the end of today's tutorial on the different data types in R. And basically we are looking at vectors. Right, so in our next tutorial, we're looking at how to create some list in R. Please, if you find value in this video, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and also click on the notification to get any update anytime I post on this channel. Don't forget to comment, like, and share. Thank you for watching.